everybody. Welcome to FSC Connect. This is the FSC's community that's online. For those of you, if it's your first time, this is a conversation we started in the deep days of COVID. I remember doing two of these a week. We're now on a regular pattern of doing them once every 3 or 4 weeks as we welcome 2024. Lots of people still joining and coming down the pipe, so we're a few minutes away from kickoff, but certainly wanted to welcome everybody to FSC Connect for our very first for 2024. And the topic, of course, is will big data and AI change everything? Delighted to welcome fantastic panel of experts with us today. We have Ben Winterbourne, who's the General Manager of Data Insight. Data Insight is an organization that helps the FSC with a lot of our data collect. So if you're a life insurer, health insurer, or one of our KiwiSaver members, Data Insight collects the data and we then anonymize it and send it back out. So they're helping the FSC with our own data conversations. Delighted to welcome Emilie McCallum from Mosaic FSI. Emilie sits on a number of our FSC committees, and Mosaic spends a lot of time helping big and small organizations kind of think about solving particular problems. So a big welcome to Emilie. And finally to Andrew Inwood. He's the global CEO of CoreData. CoreData has been helping the FSC keep the finger on the pulse of how New Zealanders are thinking and feeling about their money lives and their broader lives. And we've been working together with CoreData now for a number of years. So today's conversation is really about just leaning into the discussion on data and big data and AI and making good and informed and useful decisions. In terms of the run of play, this is an open conversation. We are on the record. We will have the Fourth Estate join us at various points in this discussion. It is a contributory and participatory exercise. So if you have a question or a statement you'd like to ask, just use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or the chat button. We are also recording this event, so we will have it available for later. So if there's stuff that you miss out on, no worries. What I'm going to do is we're going to start off. I've invited each of the panelists to just open the batting, if you will, with a little 5-minute conversation on their take on the topic. And I think we're going to start with Ben, who's going to lead out the conversation, and then we'll roll through each of the presentations and then start the discussion. So Ben, big warm welcome to you, and over to you.
Thanks, Richard. I'm Ben. I'm at Data Insight, GM at Data Insight, and we are a data analytics and AI consultancy. So naturally, this is quite a big topic for us and our customers at this point. So to answer kind of the big question of the webinar, is it going to change everything? I think it already is. So we can see ChatGPT's really started that ball rolling that's been going on for years, but that's kind of replacing jobs that we didn't think were going to be replaced. So copywriters, I think we've all probably seen SOAR and what its capabilities are, and they're going after video creation. So it's industries that we kind of didn't expect to be disrupted are the ones that are being disrupted right now. And the big thing to remember is that's just a giant leap forward in 1 year. So imagine where we're going to be in 2, 3, so with that exponential kind of growth and things. So I thought I'd cover kind of what it's being used for now as a bit of intro with a couple of use cases, and then how you guys can kind of be embracing AI. So there's kind of 4 kind of key areas where it's kind of being used at this point. So there's internal automation and efficiency, which is kind of that lens around how do we make things more efficient internally. So think about marketing and how they can use it for content writing. Real estate can quickly create descriptions for their properties. And then in the coding space, how it's disrupting that's actual coding languages and making sure that people can do things quickly and efficiently. It's got its challenges, but it's in its infancy and it's making some real changes. There's also things around automation. So how do you predict potentially maintenance that needs to be happening on power lines, etc. It's got big implications in that automation and efficiency, and that's because it's really good at this point working on unstructured data because that's where everyone's got, clean data they can be using, while their internal data in a lot of instances is not quite ready to be used. So that's where a lot of those use cases are coming through. Second one is around better customer service. So I think the big thing that's going to be changing, and you can see that already, and I've got a case study on that, is around actually intelligent chatbots. I think chatbot 1.0 was a bit of a false start, and everyone getting frustrated with actually using them and giving up and just getting in contact with real people. But I think with large language models, that's going to change quite dramatically. And then that personalized banking, so right fit, so it's ideal for embracing the CoFi standards, etc. Another big space where it's moving rapidly is around risk and fraud. So AI is really good at quickly detecting fraud anomalies in data, but there's also on the risk side of things for financial institutions, particularly, is around deep fakes. So I don't know if you all saw about 3 weeks back, there was a case in Hong Kong where he was invited to join a internal meeting with the CFO and his team to transfer some money. He thought it was suspicious, but he joined the call, basically had a meeting with them all, transferred $25 million to an account, and they were all deep fakes. So it's got some real big challenges in there for institutions and companies in general, which we're going to have to overcome. And then the other big one is around claim settlement. So using AI for fraud detection can actually speed up that claims process and automated claims bots. There's some real examples out there of what they're actually working on. So I'm taking Capital One as a good example. They've got a chatbot called Eno, which actually offers personalized FAQs. It looks out for fraud for you and contacts you if there's potential fraud on your account, and it delivers spending insights to you. So it's the kind of like all-in-one AI bot that's actually useful to the customer, and it's always available 24/7. So it's actually quite a different way at looking at how they can be used for improving basically customer service. Then there is Lemonade. So they have a claims bot that settles claims extremely quickly. So I think the record in London for a bike theft was 2 seconds. So it reviewed the claim, checked their policy, ran a lot of anti-fraud algorithms, and it came out with the agreement to pay out the claim. So there's big advances in actually speeding up that process and improving customer service. Then Upstart, another fintech out of the US, which is using AI and machine learning to essentially change the lending rules. So predominantly in America, it was based on credit scores, but that has a lot of bias in it. And lots of people that start their careers don't have very good credit scores because they haven't been able to build it up. So they've used data on what you do, how you transact, education, and other data points to essentially assess risk. There's GitHub Copilot, which is being rolled out for software development and coding. So there's been big advances in some studies. It's 55% increase in productivity for coders. So developing software will become a lot quicker. So that digitization of organizations will become a lot easier. It does have issues around actually creating quality output. So they've seen a drop in that, but it's an extremely good tool for using for efficiencies. And the last one I want to kind of touch on is JP Morgan Chase. They've automated their contract analysis and assessments by essentially feeding in all their old contracts and using an AI model to basically spot anomalies and improve their picking up essentially risk within those contracts. So they're kind of all different kind of use cases at different ends of the spectrum. One of the key things that we need to embrace, how we all embrace AI, there's kind of 4 pillars. Number one, for AI, data is the fuel. So that's the big thing to kind of work on. And it's kind of getting back to the top table that we need to use our internal data better, improve the quality of it, because that's going to be what's driving AI. Whoever owns the data wins in AI is the big thing. Think about OpenAI. They've basically gathered trillions of data points, and that's what makes it extremely good at what it does. The second kind of thing that needs to happen in organizations to really truly embrace AI is embracing like a skunk works approach, which means that you take that element outside of normal BAU, and they are to deliver AI for the organization, reduces political boundaries and issues around there, and just gets things done a lot quicker in that test and learn approach. The third one, which I think we'll touch on quite a lot in this webinar, is around managing change, which will be a huge part of AI and AI adoption. And then the fourth kind of key thing, or fourth key pillar to get in there, is data governance and governance in general around AI. So making sure that data quality is good. If your data quality is not good, you're going to really discredit your AI. And then it goes back to change management, where you're going to impact people actually picking up this thing and using it for driving your organization forward. So it's kind of four key pillars that I want to touch on there. So those are kind of some use cases, which I think we'll delve into a little bit more. And then how do you actually go about embracing it? Because I think everyone's grappling with C-suite kind of going, we need to embrace this, which rightly so they do. But actually, how do you achieve that as an organization outside of being a fintech?
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. We got plenty of questions coming through, so we'll hold them off because I think we're going to go to Andrew's opening conversation and then on to Emilie. Andrew, welcome.
I was just saying that I've used AI to just find me a better lighting for my office. One of the things that I think that we have to talk about with AI, and I want to get through this relatively quickly, and I'm appreciative of your time, is that it's actually going to change things really quite fundamentally. We've been doing this at CoreData. This use first emerged from ChatGPT and the teams about 5 years ago, and we've been tracking it ever since and been increasing our skills. It stemmed from the large language model design, and we've now got 15 people working in this space globally. So it's a non-trivial part of our 70-odd staff is working on this. And we really believe what's the information that's coming out of Microsoft, that this is going to be bigger than fire. It's certainly fundamentally already altered our businesses and the businesses that we're working with around the world, which is in the UK, the US and Australia, who are adopting it. There are half a dozen that have embraced it fundamentally, and it's really started to change the way in which they do business. And I want to touch on some of that today. So the Sundar Pichai says that this is going to be more profound than fire, and I think he's right. I think this is fundamentally going to change the way in which the work is done globally and locally, and it's going to make the world a much more interesting place to work in. So the next slide, please. If we can just start to think about how quickly this sixth wave is coming through. What's happened in the way in which things have been moving through, the change has been moving through the world, is that the waves of change are compressing. And the famous Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter called these waves of creative destruction, that you actually have to destroy your business, rebuild the business, destroy the business and rebuild the business over and over again. So the great businesses out there are already in the process of tearing their businesses down and getting them to rebuild in this space much faster than anyone has ever thought. Ben was pointing at some of the things that were already going on, but the change is fundamental. One of the trials that I looked at when I was in the USA late last year was that Wendy's and McDonald's are replacing all of their roadside assistants and all their voice box people with AI. And I went and tried to break it and spoke to them and did all those kind of things, but it's handling it perfectly. That's a non-trivial change. There's 120,000 people working in that role in the USA. And so to remove those from the work side is something which is fundamental. If we go to the next slide, please. When we think about what's going on in this space, this is the number of people, employees, and hundreds of thousands in the fast food industry who are answering phones, doing simple things and making what's going on. You can quickly see how much this has fallen. When people think that the 150,000 they had employed in this area in 2022 will halve this year to go down to 75,000 and halve again down to about 30,000 by 2025. So there's just been this low cost, low value voice-based worker, which has been a thing, is being ripped out of the industry really quickly. Here's a business that I want you to look at. This is a business which operates in financial planning in the UK. But I don't want to give their names away because people contact them, although I've just done that. And I certainly don't want to give the young woman's name away because people have rung her up directly, which can be problematic. This is the model of what they're talking about. She's ripping apart this business really quickly. But one of the ways in which they base their understanding of how their company is doing is looking at how many customers each advisor serves. And at the moment, they've gone from about 120 to about 244 in the past 3 years using the systems, machine learning and AI, though they're different things. Monitoring their FPS, their NPS, which is how happy their people are, and looking at their on-platform, which is what's called a discretionary managed fund of 3.5 billion by December 25, which is about another $700 million in growth. This is their old model. This is slightly too old. The interesting thing about this is that every one of the pieces on here are freely available and easy to get to. Teams, every conversation they have is recorded on Teams and turned from an MP3, and then from using Whisper into a text-based data lake, then using the sentence transformer and Pinecone DB, they turn it into a searchable database. So that means that every conversation is recorded, every record of conversation they can have is recorded, and they're getting incredibly good at doing two things. One, answering the next question, what's the next most likely thing that this person wants, and making sure that they can understand the jobs to be done out of every interpretation. They've added to this relatively recently Copilot, which is again part of the Microsoft Azure suite, which sits alongside everything they're doing, which means that they can interpret their team's conversation to ask it to write notes of it, ask it to do the file notes of every conversation, ask it to do minutes of the meeting, and it's doing it really well. So it's ripping time out of the system really quickly. That's the end of what I have to say. But the reality is that it's changing the industry really quickly. People are already embracing it. We've seen the use cases of customers in Australia, the UK, and the USA pushing up the number of customers per advisor, keeping the satisfaction high, and manufacturing greater intimacy with their customer by using the large language models to just make the conversation more intimate and more direct. And thank you very much for listening to me.
Thanks, Andrew. There's some key themes coming out of yours and Ben's discussion, which again we'll come back to. But for the last vignette to set the scene, Emilie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So I really don't want to dampen the enthusiasm of my two colleagues today. I just come from not a data background. And first of all, I just wanted to have a quick word on Mosaic. So we're a consultancy firm based in New Zealand, and we're helping the financial services sector to be more resilient and to have a pragmatic approach to everything that is operational challenge or regulatory obligation challenges. So these are our service lines. And as you can see, we're touching a little bit of everything, and AI could be applicable to all of those service lines. So governance, risk, compliance, operational excellence. So when we're talking about automation, when we're talking about customer services, AI can be applicable everywhere. But also one of our core business is the privacy side of things. And we're helping banks, insurance, wealth, and fund management to make sure they have their privacy by design and also the data overlay that goes with it. Basically, the question we're asking our client is, are you ready for AI? And AI, obviously, as Ben said, already has changed the landscape of the financial services, especially also overseas, but it's starting also in New Zealand. But are we ready for it? And what we're trying to do at Mosaic is to talk to the client, the regulators, the FSC members, to how do we, AI is quite scary. There's a lot of magical things that can come from it, but it's also quite scary. And especially when we talk about the deep fake, the hallucination of AI, and all the unintended consequences that can come through AI. So how do we make sure we embed that future or that present that is here already in the safest way for our employees, our clients, our societies? What I think I will cover more than my other two colleagues today will be more the need of an AI governance, and how do we, in New Zealand also, how do we embed that into our AI strategies?
Let's pretend we're sitting around Ben's dining room table having a little chat about this conversation, and everyone's had a chance to kind of put their view on the table. So I might start with you, Ben. because it looks like it's a great opportunity. It looks like we're going to reduce costs. It looks like we're going to improve or increase service and standardize service. I mean, what are the barriers to big and small organizations actually taking that up and actually implementing it if they're not up for, to Andrew's point, basically destroying and then rebuilding their business?
Yeah, I think there are some barriers. And I think that's why I talked about the kind of unstructured use cases, the first ones to look at, because I think a lot of organizations struggle with silo data. And so bringing that all together and having quality data that you can actually build AI models on is going to be a bit of a barrier. So we're kind of going back to the governance framework and going, actually, this is really important. It sounded boring at the beginning, but we need to focus on this, improve our data quality to actually have AI we can trust. So I think if you were to build it on a lot of the data we have available now in many organizations, we would just discredit it and people wouldn't use it. And that comes back to like the second kind of core pillar, which is around change management. So I think there's studies out of the US, which I think there's like at least 50% of workers are basically fearing for their job. So when you've got that fear element, how are you going to get them on board to actually embrace this, use their skills, and also kind of teach the AI and help it learn and improve things if they're fearing for their job? So it's a big thing that organizations need to get right. And it's a challenging one. How do you get everyone on board? So there's big opportunities, but there's some barriers.
But if you're, I mean, to that point, right? If you're one of the McDonald's workers who was running the drive-through or whatever you were doing, and you were one of the 450,000, and to Andrew's earlier data, you might be one of the 35,000. I mean, their fear is real, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah, 100%. They're going to be fearing for their job, and then that's going to lead on to it's going to disrupt white collar jobs. That's one of the big things that is going to come out of this. It's like the next industrial revolution, which we still haven't really got over how we deal with that. How do we get people back into work in areas that were traditionally, those kind of core skill jobs? So how are we going to do that again for the next wave?
Yeah, Andrew, your take on this? I mean, you raised the Macca's drive-through example. It's pretty scary stuff if you're in there, right? Or not?
No, it's very scary stuff, and I mean, even in CoreData, it's relatively scary stuff. And we've got a kind of year-long program of training for people to doing. But there's interestingly, groups are already self-selecting out. We're saying, here's the program's training. This is training one. It's running on these days this week. We've already got people saying, I don't want to do this, and it's like, well, this is kind of self-selection bias here, which is interesting. There's some curious economic outcomes of this, and I don't want to get too much into it, but already we've taught a large language model to pass what's called the compliance tests in Australia by dumping the law into an LLM and then asking it the right questions. Already we're using it to write at the first pass of our questionnaires, something that someone would normally take a day to do. We're using it to do that. Already we're going from data to histogram and then asking AI to provide us the interesting crosstabs. And then already we've built a data lake which has got 20 years of data and of our own data in it, which we can look for variations on common themes, and we're asking it to do that. So it's moving incredibly quickly. The reality is that it will be taking people's jobs. There's a challenge in this for the financial services industry. The back office is going to be highly automated, but the front office, the person-to-person thing will never change unless the robots become really, really good at this, helping people make complex decisions and fear-based decisions, and helping people defer pleasure, which is what so much of financial services is. That can't be affected. Emilie's questions about AI having hallucinations and doing those things and being unfettered, they're real concerns as well, because I don't know if you've read all the experiments out of the US, but some pretty interesting things are happening. And just to put this in context, there are about 130 new academic papers on AI entering into the universe every day. And so making sense of that is kind of complex, but jobs will change, and the way in which people approach data will change, and the way in which skills will be recognized will be changed. So all of those things have to be dealt with. But the basic stuff, the stuff that we have 30 people doing now, which is data to histogram, that'll be gone this year. So that's real, and we're trying to rapidly retrain people as quickly as we can.
I'm going to come back to the change management retraining conversation, but Emilie, one of your slides, I think, had was it the World Economic Forum's kind of mission and vision on this stuff. I mean, those words look lovely, but how realistic is that in terms of AI being a force for good?
I think so. If you look at the World Economic Forum Future of Job reports, they're saying by 2025, 85 millions of jobs may be displaced by the shift in the division of labor between human and machine. What they say also, though, it's 97 million new roles will emerge. So it's not all doom and gloom. The problem, I would say, is that with the speed of AI and how it trends, maybe us human, we don't have the time to think on our feet and to train the people for the future job that we don't know yet. And I think that's where we have to be careful. There's some use case where a company in the US changed all of their frontline with AI. So they removed their frontline worker with AI, and it worked really well at the beginning. But then they realized they didn't have anyone to train for the next level job. So that's the kind of thing we need to think of, maybe going little by little, even though AI is very tempting, but maybe in parallel. So you still have that human factor to it.
So I'm going to come back to that governance question as well, but I'm just going to go to the questions coming in. Question here from Barry. AI systems still need people. The key is to work out how in your respective sector or industry do you become a valuable human. Some jobs will be lost, but new jobs will be created. So let's toss that to the panel. What are some of the new jobs in, say, the broader financial services sector do we think are going to be created, given the demise of, taxi drivers and Macca's drive-through consultants and so on and so forth? Emilie, I might start with you on that one, and then Ben, head to you.
Well, if you take the financial services sector, if you take the AML, AML, CFT, all the fraud, etc., on the payment side of things, having AI system to really crunch the data that can find trends, etc., and help, investigation teams to solve all the easiest cases, then you can have all your focus and your brain on the more complex cases, I would say, and maybe also from a customer experience that might be easier. It's really good to put AI to say, hey, if you've got something, I can't remember which company, Ben, you were referring to, but where you're saying, oh, there's a fraud on your credit card or something, so give us a call if there's something. Well, it's really well, but if everybody is busy and your customer team, your customer call team, can't take the call because they're too busy, it's kind of a moot point. So I think it has to change, and the culture of the organization have to change at the same pace.
Thanks, Emilie. Ben?
Yeah, so I think going back to Andrew's point around people still like talking to people. So I think there's always room. So I think there's going to be changes in the way that claims are dealt with, but you're going to have that mishmash of AI that deals with the simple ones, going back to Emilie's point, and then someone that actually picks up the more challenging ones and stepping in. There's also going to be roles around actually prompt engineering. So how do you ask the right questions and how to get the right answers? And more work in that kind of training AI space is going to be critical, because otherwise, going back to your point, Emilie, where's it going to learn from?
I'll come to Andrew in a moment, but I mean, I guess the conundrum is, we're talking about very white collar, highly technical, highly skilled roles here, right? Which, what's the professional services sector? The last time the FSC did this work in the broader financial services sector, there were something like about 60, 70 odd thousand Kiwis employed, right? But there's a lot of people that are not in that space. So are we talking about something at the fringes here? Are we talking just about service companies? Or are we talking kind of wholesale change across the entire economy? Maybe throw that one to Andrew, and Ben, you're nodding, and so is Emilie. Maybe we'll come back to you guys.
So the reality is wholesale change across the entire economy, from everything from food production to financial services. being candid, that we're trying to train as many people as we can to be expert at AI as quickly as possible, and people how to use the systems. So systems and program. We've added, as I said before, 17 people in this space, and we're repurposing a bunch of people. We've used AI to take our server, the number of servers that we're using to run our systems globally down from 25 to 10. And the guy who's running it has come to us and said, I want to repurpose that money on employing people who are extremely good at what's called sample intelligence, mining data out of the internet to pull it into. So we said, sure. 2 years ago, that job didn't exist, and now we're employing young computer science graduates to do those types of things. The other part of that is kind of fast-paced monitoring of what's going on. Our family's involved in primary production as well as financial services, and the use of AI to produce more pigs than usual is something which has had a profound effect on what we're doing in terms of two critical numbers, going from 730 to 900 piglets a week, and also in decreasing the fattening cycle. So all those systems are out there, and they're being used all over the place. So if you think it's happening in financial services, it's at scale across every industry. The big industries like logistics, like transport, like pricing, et cetera, are putting it out. I don't know if you had Taylor Swift turn up in New Zealand. If you didn't, I'm very pleased for you. I think it's type of music which doesn't do much for me, but the ACCC is rapidly investigating the repricing of services through Swiftflation and using AI to sort of model out those things. So that kind of stuff is happening. So it's new, it's expanding. Retraining and getting into it is pretty important. There are great courses online, and companies like ours who are desperate to teach people to be good at it as fast as possible. Because I don't think, and I'd say this to my team, that AI won't replace your job. Someone who knows how AI to do your job more efficiently will replace you. So that's why we've got a year-long training program being built and being rolled out so that people can get into it, because I've already learned how to do my job a lot more efficiently using it. And I'm sure there's a lot more people, a lot more smarter than me out there doing interesting things.
Okay, we're not going to talk about Swifties or fattening piglets. We might stay on financial services. Ben, your take on that question?
Yeah, I'm with Andrew on this one. I think it's having profound impact across the entire economy. So from medical, it's speeding up the advances in that space. It's it's just touching every point. It's disrupting every industry. Ones that we did not expect would be disrupted.
So just to interrupt, Ben, my skin cancer checks are now done by an AI. So no doctor involved. I get scanned, and it throws up all the anomalies. And so if there's any changes, it's been picked up by an AI camera, not a human. And they think it's 100 times more effective than a doctor looking at it.
Yeah, you're just removing that human error, right, from the process. We did a project, a while ago that was looking at basically how do you get the best bar of soap out of this process through using AI, basically looking at the entire process, all the ingredients that went in it to basically fine-tune this. So it's being used in weird and wonderful ways across every industry.
Thanks, Ben. Emilie, anything you want to add to that conversation?
I would just say that, as Andrew was saying, if you might not be replaced by AI, but you might be replaced by someone who uses AI. I completely agree with this. I would say the flip side of the coin also is maybe a growing percentage of people and risk people, for example, in our industry will go into being AI governance professional to actually help the current risk team and strategy team to actually embed AI properly. And that's something that is non-negligible as well.
Hey, there's an awesome question here.
So I just want to interrupt Emilie here. Sorry, Richard, I'm just going to do this. In the 1850s, the French decided that the French language was full and that they weren't having any more words. So the entire French science industry went across the border to Strasbourg, and Germany produced Colochrome, Kodachrome, Perkins, BASF, because the French decided they wanted to go really slowly on that. And the Germans said, screw it, let's do it as fast as we can. That's a big risk, right? Governance can't be the speed at which you build opportunity in this side of the industry. It has to be alongside it, but it can't be the governor of speed.
Well, I completely agree with you. But it's also, I think, what's is needed is people like you, for example, who really do understand AI, to make sure you can verify also what AI gives you. And
So,
that's what I'm talking about.
so there's a question that goes to the heart of this, right? And it's kind of, is AI a force for good or a force for bad? Question is this: how can people and organizations rely on AI products given the opacity of the inputs and the decisions and the recent examples of AI creators deliberately interfering with outputs to further an agenda other than the user's use case? Example here is Google Gemini AI. So, you know, um, how do we keep this? How do we keep this thing as a force for good? Because we've seen every system in the world get used both for good, but it certainly attracts bad actors, state actors, malicious actors, evil actors, opportunistic actors. I'm not sure who wants to have a crack at that question. Maybe Ben, start with you, then go to Emilie.
Yeah. So I think, how do we make sure it's a force for good? I think that comes back to the governance thing. I think it is important, but going back to Andrew's point, not putting the handbrake. I think it's the right fit for governance for each organization, depending on their risk appetite, etc. I think we can't really stop it being a force for bad either, because the genie's out the bottle. There's open source LLMs all around. Going back to that example I shared with the deepfakes, that's already out there. Some of the legislation is trying to stop that, but it's going to happen. So we've got to prepare ourselves for deepfakes, the fraud to increase, and the sophistication of those things to actually increase.
Emilie.
Yeah, this morning at the FinTech UI, we were listening to someone who was saying that also now on the dark web, for example, you can have hackers as a service. So you don't even have to be good at doing it. You can have someone doing it for you. And I think that's where it's getting also dangerous. But I would say to counter this, AI should be open. For your organization, should be open, should be traceable. So if someone asks, how did you reach those conclusions? Or then you have to be able transparently to show how you got there. Has to be trusted and has to be targeted. And I think even though we don't have necessarily in New Zealand yet an AI Act, or we've got also on the data privacy side of things, or coffee or everything that could be an overlay and can put guardrails through it. And I completely agree that we can't put the handbrake on it. We just have to be maybe a bit more guarded at the beginning.
Andrew.
So we've already exploited AI. We used a combination of a thing called Sora and 11 Labs to mimic one of Australia's financial services professionals and make him give a speech closing down his business, which we ran at the front of their conference for the giggles of it. And it was almost impossible to tell that it wasn't this person giving the speech. But the reality is that we're kind of algorithm on algorithm now. That what's being used for good is also being used for evil. Let me give you an example. I go to Boston a lot. We have a business there, and obviously they're deep into understanding what's going on with the research there. When you turn up at the Boston airport now, you used to have to go to the machine, scan your passport, get a little ticket, go to the things, insert the ticket, get another ticket, and go and stand up. Now, when you go into Boston, you walk up to the man and he says, "Hello, Andrew. Are you still staying at 8 Union Street?" That's all driven by AI facial recognition and what's going on in that space. If you're a clean skin like me, then that's fantastic. It's taken an hour out of the journey. If you're a bad actor, then this is a really bad thing, right? And you can imagine that the bad actors are getting at least the access to that information. One of the guys who's part of our panel in the UK works for the British Secret Service, and he said, "Oh no, we're well beyond facial recognition now. It's actually gait, which is harder to hide. So we've got gait recognition. We recognize how people walk and act and move." So if you think that the financial services industry is moving quickly, then the rest of the world's moving incredibly quickly. It will be algorithm on algorithm, and you're just going to have to hope that the good actors are acting as quickly as the bad actors, because everyone seeks profit. That's kind of the nature of things, some more openly than others.
I would add to that, though, that sometimes also the data that is put inside, and when you've got the bias that come into play, and sometimes the data you put to test your AI system or your AI solution is taken on data that are biased by nature, and everybody has heard of the Amazon in 2014, the Amazon web, when for recruiting people, they're just starting to recruit only male because they were based on data that previously for the 20 years, they were mainly male applicants. So that's where we just have to make sure the data that goes in.
So I agree, Emilie, but the data feeds are getting so big now. We're beyond feeds, right? We're into scraping. So you can scrape all of LinkedIn now. You can, and so we've built a little service which is looking at company results. So we've gone back 20 years and looking at what's happening in company results and looking for the common integers in it. And then we've tracked and worked out that it's individuals who are driving those results, and they move from one company to another. That's going to create different prices for those men and women who kind of work in those kind of spaces. So that kind of data will both be good and bad because it's going to create deep and fine variation in pricing and outcomes.
Let me just talk about folks, this is your session, so if you've got questions, just keep on sending them through. Just wanted to pick up this kind of regulation and policy discussion, right? Because in most of the OECD, you got politicians setting policy, regulators who regulate policy, and on something like this, the market is moving way faster than any of those, right? So then the question is, can and should policy and regulators help augment and drive this, or are they more the handbrake and kind of setting the guardrails so that bad stuff doesn't happen? Just interested in people's take on this. Start with you, Emilie, if that's all right.
Yep, I was about to take it. I would say, first of all, that there's a debate as to, do we have to regulate AI, or do we have to regulate the tools, or do you have to regulate the users of it? And so that's a big debate I'm not going to get in. I think regulators can help at least to put guardrails through it, and the same with data privacy. My take on it is it's not because you can that you should automatically go down a path. So I think it's good to have the support of regulations, as long as they do understand what's going on in that world, and as long as they can work as quickly as the AI is evolving, which is another challenge.
Thanks, Emilie. Ben?
Yeah, I think the regulators and politicians, etc., do need to take a bit of a lead in terms of kind of the education. So what kind of guardrails need to be in place for organizations? But then if you look at, for example, the AI Act in Europe, it's pretty wide-reaching, and it's saying what's good, what's bad. And I just feel like if you're too strict on things, you're just going to stifle innovation massively. And I think Andrew had a point earlier around, you're just going to be leapfrogged in terms of a country if you have too much governance on you.
Yeah, Andrew, you were in our earlier chat. Yep.
Yeah, the kind of reality of this is that, I mean, we're operating in 3 different countries and going 4 different countries, going as fast as we can, from highly regulated to not at all regulated. And part of the joy of having businesses driving data out of East Asia is that the regulation is very light. But the reality is that what we're seeing in terms of regulation has been driven by the tech companies themselves. Google's recently made a bunch of changes to regulate the way in which people can interact with the market. Microsoft hasn't done those yet, but our expectation is that they're going to follow the kind of scraping and information laws that they have, and that permission-based actions are becoming much more tricky to run. So building up those big data pools are going to be tricky. So while there is case law yet running, the most famous of which is the one in the US about the New York Times, which is being scraped by OpenAI. It is the tech companies which are proving to be the more effective regulators of what they're supplying, how they're allowing people to act. And it's impossible to build your own AWS or Google server farm. I mean, you can't. I mean, you can, but it would cost billions, and you might have to be the Chinese government to do that. But that's where the real changes and sort of limits are coming from at the moment.
Because just to Andrew on that, sorry, Emilie, I mean, the big firms, which are, have a market value and turnover bigger than many countries in their own right. I mean, this is where the future of power lies, right? With your Alphabets and your Microsofts, and they're a law unto themselves because they pretty much in everybody's hand, everybody's laptop, everybody's device.
Yeah, so the most common version of that is NVIDIA. I mean, I don't know if you saw the NVIDIA bumped by 16% this week, which is bigger than both of Australia's biggest mining companies put together. Went up by 16 billion or something in a couple of days. So the reality is that it's the management of those industries which is driving the real regulation of AI, not governments at this stage. So NVIDIA, Alphabet, as Richard pointed out, and Microsoft are the real controllers of it. And I don't know many people in the management of those companies, but they are unbelievably, for want of a more pejorative phrase, thinking about the social impact of what they're doing in a way which perhaps the governments aren't. So, I mean, they're onto it. But there are, other state actors there who are not. I mean, and you can imagine who those are.
Yeah. Sorry, Emilie, you were about to dive in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that from a pragmatic point of view, I think maybe in New Zealand we would need more of a sandbox, regulatory sandbox or something. So and it's a private-public partnership, so we can have the regulators coming, we can have the more of the fintech, working on AI, being able to try fast, fail fast, or succeed fast, and then having more of a collaboration. I think we would really benefit from that.
But New Zealand's not slouches though, right? FNZ is a Kiwi company, and they're doing incredible things around the world. And some of the price of the deals that they've done recently would seem to indicate that they've found a lot of savings in their cost manufacturing. So they're going to be just as important as everyone. So I think it's really important that New Zealand doesn't lag it in this, because they're a world-class player in this space.
Yeah, it was a big theme up at the FinTech Hui earlier. Hey, folks, we got time for probably two last themes. I just want to bring us back to one topic we spoke about, which is kind of the change management discussion. What works, what doesn't work. How do you help people on that journey versus kind of opting out because it's too big or it's too difficult and so on. Andrew, did you want to open the batting on that one? What are you seeing globally, but also in your own business?
So globally, we're seeing people really embrace the fintech journey and conversation. There is a refactoring of staff and that's going on, where people are talking about taking away the mundane jobs and driving on the outcomes. There's kind of a weird other part of this going on as well. I don't know if you've seen the universal basic income trials in Flint, Michigan, where they're saying, well, okay, everybody's effectively getting this much money a week and we're going to retrial it. But the industries which are leading it are things like the electricity transmission industry, where a lot of the jobs can be replaced by those processes. The ag companies, not so much. Fintech, that people are spending real money on it. In Aussie, at least, the big banks have $100 to $200 million programs where they're building out the systems, retraining, and getting people in it. Even little old CoreData is expecting to spend $250,000 on this in the next 12 months to make sure that we retrain people and get people through the system, because we have to be really thoughtful about the team and really thoughtful about creating the right opportunities and also doing the best for our clients. Because if we don't do this, our competitors will, and we pride ourselves on being technological leaders. So that's the reality of that. We do know that, for example, CBA, which is one of Australia's biggest banks, is spending $250 million on this. So these are non-trivial sums with expectations of real uplift in that space.
Thanks, Andrew. Ben, what are you seeing?
So I think there's two elements, right? There's the people that are going to be replaced, and then there's the people that are going to be augmented. So the people that need to be augmented, they're going to be the ones that need the training around the why. Why is it beneficial for me rather than me putting up my walls? So how is it going to help them in their day-to-day job? How is it not going to replace them? There's the kind of like fine line at that point. For the people that are being replaced, that's the retraining basically. And that's a big challenge, I think, society. How are we going to do that? We didn't exactly cover ourselves in glory in the last industrial revolution, where we displaced all those jobs. So I think it's up to organizations and governments to leapfrog this a little bit more than we are. Because if we go back to things like social media, governments weren't particularly good at figuring out what the privacy laws should look like, what those frameworks look like. So it has to be going back to the point of being driven by business and regulators. I think, businesses are going to be driving that forward more than regulators.
Thanks, Ben. We were talking a little earlier just about, this kind of global disruption, and we're living in a world where there's a lot of haves and have-nots, very, very first world and very, very not. Question for you, Ben. Do you think this is going to just accelerate that, widen the gap?
Unless we wake up and make some fundamental changes, yes, in the short term, it's going to have some serious challenges. Just going back to the exponential changes that are happening. I mean, it's only been a year and a bit since ChatGPT and OpenAI kind of launched onto the scene, and just seeing how things have changed is just quite alarming. It's been going on for years, but it's just accelerating now, and it's going to keep on accelerating.
Hey, there's a few questions come through. I'm just going to go to those in a moment. But Emilie, last word to you on this one.
I would say that the main thing is people, whether it's the employees or the C-suite or the government, need to really understand what AI is. A lot of people think they do understand, but then when you go down deeper layer, it's getting a bit, fuzzy. So I think really understand what it is and what it can bring, whether the bad or the good, and maybe starting also more in the education systems, bringing our kids younger to that, to understand what it can bring, and also understanding what are the current and maybe the future regulation that are around. So then you can make informed decisions for yourself and your company and the society.
Cool. Hey, just going to give you a flavor of some of the other questions. We won't go to them, but there are a couple of themes here per per Ben's example, which is, if AI can, people can be scraped and impersonated and deep faked, is that going to lead to an increasing amount of fraud, scams, and therefore liability? And will it take us back to the old world, or is the genie now out of the bottle? And the other kind of theme going on here is just to that governance piece, which is around, what role do boards have in helping to shepherd some of these answers and position businesses for the future, managing people, managing risk, managing cyber and fraud, and so on. So I won't go to those. I just wanted to give a flavor of some of the questions. So thank you for those. Hey, last question. For those of us who've got kids, there was a question there about should all this be taught in schools. But if you're advising your kids, nieces and nephews, anyone in your world, what's your, how do you make this personal? What do you say to people, given that we are having these kind of conversations, and the next generation and the next generation are kind of living with the consequences? Ben, I'll start with you. I'll go to Emilie, and I'll finish with Andrew.
So the amazing thing around kids is they're pretty resilient and adaptable. So I think, in terms of AI adoption, they're probably ahead of the curve. They're using it for their homework, doing research. They're already onto it. They're ahead. I think we're the ones that are going to be playing catch up around how do we educate them in this world? How do we kind of nurture them into figuring out what their career is? So I think the onus is kind of on us.
Fantastic. Okay, good. Optimistic. Emilie.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ben. My 12-year-old is much more advanced than me on a lot of things, AI and tech, than me. There was just a quick example where the Chinese government put some algorithm in their TikTok, and it was all science-based, etc. And so they were limiting the time kids could go on it. And there was a global survey, and for the same age, usually Chinese kids were saying around 12-year-old, they want to be astronauts and scientists, etc. And American kids were saying they want to be influencers. So, yeah.
There you go. There you go. And Andrew, last word to you. Thank you, Emilie.
Well, yeah, the algorithm is very clever. I don't have TikTok because I think I understand how it works and what it drives it. So I'd rather be a bit more anonymous than that. And I'd encourage you to think very carefully about it. I do have Instagram, but someone was saying that Instagram was full of girls in bikinis dancing. And I said, really? Mine's full of economists. So the algorithm's kind of worked out what you read and what you watch, and it's done very, very very carefully and very thoughtfully. The conversation I have with my kids, and they're a little bit older, is that the internet is not a safe space. Be very careful about it. Be very careful about what you put up, and only have a curated presence on the internet, not something which is perhaps as intimate as you think it would be. And then learning how to use it for good becomes really powerful. You have to be a skilled user of the services to be into it. And frankly, they are being taught about it. Like Emilie says, as mine are a bit older, they're kind of in the last stages of university, but they're unbelievably skilled at using all the tools. So they frighten me, to be perfectly honest. But that's a good thing, I think.
Fantastic, folks. 429, that's been a really interesting and provocative discussion. So on behalf of all of us around this virtual table, thanks to the presenters for your insights and for your forthright, provocative views. If you've got any ideas about what else you want to hear on our FSC Connect, let us know. But on behalf of us here, let's give you a virtual clap, and we will see you on the next session. In the meantime, on the 27th of Feb, enjoy the rest of your week. Couple of events coming up in the FSC community. Our huge and giant Women in Super launch with the FSC is taking place on the 27th. Registrations are going nuts, so get in while you can. And of course, our conference in September also fantastic support. So look out for that. Any questions, just reach out to any in the FSC team. And for that, enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And it could even be sunny in Auckland tomorrow, and that would be a good thing. Ciao for now. Bye.